Okay, so welcome back to the Press and Poured Out. I'll admit I took a little bit of a break, but it was really more of like I just didn't want to force anything, and I just wanted to wait for the next person to recover and who wanted to come on and chat about it. So this might be the only thing in my life that I probably like don't force to happen. So I'm just gonna let the Lord be like, just make a recording, do an episode whenever the opportunity arises. And so today I'm chatting with Sarah, which I'm super pumped because she is my one-on-one client, but her story is same, but also different. So I'm excited because you are a mom, right? And so a lot of people are like, I'm trying to be a mom, and you're on the other side, right? So what made you be able to pull your head out of the denial sand pit and be like, yes, I do have kids, but I still want to address this?
Yeah, so I think for me, two things. I think my kids made me kind of realize that I was living life halfway, and I was living life not in a joyful place. And so for me, so my kids forced me to realize I wasn't living fully and with a joy, and I wasn't modeling that for them the way I would want a woman or their mother to model healthy living. And as they have gotten older, they're 8. I realize now they just pick up on so many little things that I do, and my actions speak so much louder than my words. And so even though I may have been saying all the right things, they're picking up on the things I'm doing more. And from that same perspective, my kids, when you look at HA and disordered eating, I wanted to live, like when I look into my ideal life, I want to be 80 years old and have grandkids, great grandkids, whatever that may look like, 80, 90 years old. And if I continue down this path with tanked hormones, disordered eating, high stress, all of the compounding effects, I knew that wasn't a reality. And I think when you have children, it can scare you into that reality quicker than anything. When you see how fast they grow up and you think, I may not be able to, I might get osteoporosis. I may already have osteopenia, like whatever your situation is. And I won't be able to play on the floor with my kids. I won't be able to run around with my grandkids. And so I think just there's a real kick in the pants to think about what life is really about.
You said so many good things, and like ding ding ding, all these things pop up in my head. One of the interesting things that I wasn't going to bring up, but I do think is interesting, is that I actually have a lot of clients with osteopenia, and they're at completely different ages. It's so interesting that I think like we hear that and we're like, oh, that's for the elderly. And when it's like 20 something year olds, 30 something year olds, you know what I mean? Between 20 and 40, you know what I mean? It really makes me think like, no, this isn't an age thing. This is like a hormonal condition thing, meaning if you're pouncing around at 25, 26, but still functioning in like the depths of HA, like you're not exempt just because you're 25 or 26. I'm not exempt
Right.
just from 34 if I choose to not have a cycle. And I say choose not to have a cycle just simply because this is reversible, right? And
Right. Oh yeah.
yeah, and like just some encouragement that like we were talking with Holly Dunn, she's another HA practitioner, and I love what she says. She's like, your bones are not dead. Like they can't heal. It does take time. It takes probably a lot more time than what we want to like. I mean, that's a long ball game, but it's not impossible, And so it really makes us, I feel like it's almost the same, not same as like investing. Like you kind of just don't think about it, when like you're young until you, I don't know, hit this magic age above 35 or 34 where you're like, oh yeah, what about retirement? You know what I mean? Or like, oh yeah, like my kids are going to grow up really fast and then they're going to have kids. And am I going to be confined to like the chair because I can't hang out with them? Because you know what I mean? Simply you know, it's just so interesting that like we go from this magic age where nothing impacts us to we realize like, oh, hold on, like there's life after 35 and I plan to have a blast.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? I feel like it's like you like wisdom somehow starts to compound and increase past like 34, right? Or something like that. And then you're like, oh, wait, hold on. Like,
Yep.
I have so much I still want to do, so many things that I'm interested in.
Yeah. And I think too, because I'm almost 30, I'm 37.
Okay, yeah.
And I feel like every year that goes by, like I care less and less about what I look like and more about like the people closest to me. And I know something that you've talked about a lot and Danny talk about a lot together are like the invisible audience. And I think my like invisible audience, and I think this was one blessing for me from COVID when you were shut in with your family, is like, who do you really care about and who really cares about you and who's actually looking at you? And I think for me, from a Christian perspective, I realized how selfish it's not something that is totally gone from my life, but like focusing on my food, my exercise, my appearance 24/7, like it was literally in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep one night. And I just thought about it from like an outside perspective. If I wrote down like how much I thought about myself during the day, what that would look like, how much time I was thinking about myself and or making choices for my family based on me. And I just realized how selfish I was. And then it was so much for this invisible audience of whom I could not even define and or would never meet. And so I think COVID for me kind of opened my eyes up to who's really in that circle that's going to be there from age 37 to 77.
So good. Okay, hold on. So let's backtrack because I love that you brought that up. Because that was like the Lord had popped that on me, right? So if anybody who's listening to this and then like you listen to any of the episodes I do or any of the community calls I do in the HA Society, you're like, oh yes, she is weaving this in. You just don't know it. But
yes,
Lord had really, yeah, I'm like, but when you know, you're like, oh, she's all over this. You know what I mean? But I do want to explain the invisible audience to anybody else who's possibly that's new to. So the Lord had really walked me through similar to what you feel like the Lord walked you through is like, Ashley, if everybody around you actually doesn't care what size you are, if your husband does not care, if your friends don't care, you work from home and or you don't really care about your coworkers, who are you constantly like striving for? And I couldn't name it. I couldn't put a face to it. There were like, I couldn't write down like, this is who I'm trying to impress. Or
right.
especially because of my personality, like this is who I act, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm really trying to impress this person because I want them to like me. Like that just naturally doesn't, thankfully, that's one of the things that's just not my jam. But I was still acting that way.
Right. And I think it's almost harder when you don't know the person, because if it was like, I'm trying to impress Susie, then like it's easy to me. That's easier than for you and me. And so I feel like it's so many women, it's like the world, it's so much. And that's almost like heavier because then you can't just say, oh, well, I'm just not going to hang out with Susie, or like, I'm going to have a talk with Susie. It's like, I'm going to have a talk with all of these people who I don't even know, but like it's everyone.
So one of the things that, you know, like the Lord started showing me who am I, and it's wild. Like it was like really, and I'm going to say silly because I feel silly saying it, but I know it's valid. But I was like, so am I upset if I don't get random compliments from random strangers? Like, is that who I'm really trying to look lean for? Because I actually don't care if my sister thinks this. I actually don't care if my mom, dad, stepmom think this. But I do get this little boost of validation when a random person says something to me. So am I literally sacrificing my health? So a person who I don't even know their name, a random person who I'm never going to see again, compliments me? Is that what I'm really putting on the table is a validation? And then this other weird thing, it would be almost as if, and like, I know it's weird, but when I said it out loud, when I finally said it out loud, everyone else was like, yeah, I kind of sometimes do that too. That's weird. But it was almost as if my high school peer group was to just drop in on me. What would they think? Like, did I make anything of myself? Like, how did I look? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like just, it was just this weird association of, is this invisible audience like my hometown? Is it my like graduating class? Is it the people, friends that I'm not even friends with in that graduating class? If they were randomly run into me, like, oh yeah, she totally has her life together. You know what I mean? I was
Right.
like,
And I think that
what I'm
too,
sacrificing
like,
everything for?
yeah, and I think the Lord through that, like that same type conversation in my spirit, in my head, started to show where I had like, and I've really dug into a lot of like anti-diet and fat phobic type stuff over the past couple of years. And I think then I'm like, okay, if that's, I'm worried about them judging me that way, really, ding, ding, ding. Like that's the judgment that I show towards other people, whether I want to admit it or not. Like, and society has conditioned us, right? Like success looks like XYZ. And so I want to look like success. Therefore, I'm going to do whatever it takes to look like that. And so I think it was kind of like this winding trail for me where, yes, I was worried about myself. And then it was like just like a sucker punch to the gut where I was like, oh, wait, that's because that's how I judge people.
Yeah, it's yes. And so when you said that, success looks like, I had like this glimpse of, okay, success for me looked like some nice curls, long hair, some really cute sunglasses, and these really wide legged pants that I've been checking out, like, you know, like a black on black. And I'm like, Ashley, that is not your life. but I think even then, like, we have this, like, this is what success looks like. So if anybody pops in on me and I don't measure up to this, I'm not successful, right? And to your point, do I do that to other people? I know that was like an off topic tangent, but bringing up to the fact of, am I trying to perform for this invisible audience? And I think of, it's a Brene Brown quote where she talks about, like, you know, being like in, you know, like only caring about the people who are in it with you, not the people that are in the stands. And so when I think about invisible audience, I actually see faceless people in the stands, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But to kind of circle this back to what the Lord was showing me of, Ashley, you care more about the invisible audience rather than like receiving the truth that I say about you. And I was going through, oh my gosh, I'm going through a Hebrew study, and it was talking about approval from God, and like it was called divine approval. And the Lord was like, yeah, do you seek divine approval? And we're specifically talking about God. Let's not get crazy. Or are you trading it for like the world's approval? And I think I was chatting with you or somebody else. And so I was thinking about, like, we're like made to seek the approval. We are. And so I don't really know if the answer is to stop seeking approval. But anytime that we seek approval outside of God, it just goes so south. It's never enough. The Botox is never enough. You know, like the hair extensions is never enough. The eyelashes is never enough. You know what I mean? Like getting thin is never enough. Then it has to be this, or because I'm designed for to seek the approval of God. When I do, it's actually life-giving, and he gives me something in return. Like when I seek his approval and when I spend time with him, he literally ministers to me and he fills me up, and I have a better idea of who I am in him. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that invisible audience is actually way.
And I think for me, whenever I find that I'm seeking my approval from something or through some other method other than the Lord, it usually reveals where the idolatry, like if you're seeking approval from anything other than the Lord, when you trace back where that's coming from, it's going to reveal an idol, because then you're just putting your time and your effort into that thing or those people instead of worshiping the Lord. So I think it's kind of connected, like you can trace it back to the root idol.
Oh, totally. And I love what you said, of like, you're like, what the Lord really showed me was I was being selfish. And almost every person with HA that I've gotten to know, they're really nice people. And so it's really hard for us to equate being selfish with someone who's nice. But that's like the Lord is good.
And it
whenever
doesn't feel good.
like,
I mean, I remember when I was thinking about it, like it made me feel disgusting because, and nobody else, well, I take that back because I think sometimes we don't want to see it, but I think like my spouse, my husband, whether he wouldn't sit there and say you're being selfish, but I think he could identify selfish characteristics in behavior and mannerisms. But then again, he also knew that like with an eating disorder past, like some of that is just the way I've been wired. And so he was very tender around that. But I think that, yeah, most people would never describe me as that, but they also don't know what's going on, like the internal chatter and the exhaustion that you feel from constantly doing all of those things. Like they don't see that, they don't feel that. And then because I don't want to, and here's where I think it gets tricky is like, because we don't want to appear selfish, then you have to work even harder to like do all of that without people knowing. And so it's exhausting to act like that and cover it up.
well, yeah. And so thinking about it, because the Lord, disordered eating isn't from the Lord, and neither is eating disorders. So it's not going to produce fruit in our life. It is going to produce more sin in our life. So I think it's a breakthrough moment whenever we realize that disordered eating and disordered eating habits in our eating disorders, make sure I grab them all, is not going to produce fruit in your life. It is not ever going to produce kingdom fruit. And so it's one of those things that whenever we choose to hold on to that over what God is calling us to choose, that's really where I do think a hardened heart starts to happen. It really, because we start to become numb to the call of letting it go, right? Of letting it out. So walk me through when were you like, okay, I realize all this, Lord. I mean, you know, like, because it's always like a reckoning. I know mine was like a reckoning, right? Where do you think your first step was in being obedient to the Lord of letting this go? Because I know the Lord doesn't call us to be perfect, and he doesn't call us to do everything in our own strength, but he does call us to partner with him. So where do you think you first started to partner with him of working on this and letting it go?
Yeah. So to kind of rewind, I suffered from anorexia around the age of like 17, 18. So beginning of college through the middle of college. And I went through recovery at a wonderful place, and I really felt the Lord. That was one time when I can like identify him being active in my life and speaking to me. And I would have said that I was recovered. Now, so this is 20 years later, throughout that whole time, I felt good. I was very thankful. My faith has gotten so much stronger, but I feel like in the past 2 to 3 years, I've felt him, you know, every now and then. I feel like for me, it starts quietly and then a little bit like more frequent and louder and more frequent. And then it's just like a crescendo to like, I'm not going to let you go like until you listen to me, in a loving father way.
Oh,
but
amen,
so,
right? Amen.
Yeah. And now, and when you have children, like you totally get it. Like you're trying to tell him, and then you just have to tell him. But so I heard him just saying like, yeah, you're physically recovered, but like, is this the life you think I have for you? Because I have so much more for you. And I think for me, and I think he understands me, is like, I trusted him when it was really scary to physically recover. And I think he and I had to like I had to work up trust in him that like throughout that whole time. And some of those times, like I went off path, right? But like I had to learn to trust him that like he is good and he will be there through it all. And I got to a place of like, not like severe depression, but I was just like, well, this is a good life. But like, I didn't find the joy. And I just remember crying and praying and being like, I just want to hear, like, I just want to feel joy. I just want to see joy. I just want to be joy. And him being like, well, that's because you're not living fully the life that I have for you. And but it did not mean that I like was like, oh, okay, well, what's that mean? I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. Like, that sounds good.
You're like, that's
And
long
so
old.
yeah. And I think though, then so for me, it was like little moments over, like, I would say the past 2 to 3 years. So for instance, like, I remember each of my kids' birthdays and just being like, nibble at the cake if I ate any cake, or like not eating ice cream. And then like a week later, I would sit and I would sob because I'm like, I couldn't eat the ice cream. I couldn't eat the birthday cake. I couldn't, like, on vacation, I couldn't have a bite of ice cream, or all these things where like it was almost in my head as though I was watching like old family videos of that event. And I was just sitting there, you know, like sitting, but not in it. And I was like, well, that's a real bummer of a life. Like, why would I want to be the person sitting, just watching and not in that life, in that moment? And so I think I was just like, I'm tired of doing that. That's the joy, right? Like, the joy is in, and it doesn't have to be the food, it's the experience. Like, I wasn't in that moment with my kids, whether I was eating or not. I was so far away from them. And I think he just kept showing me, because I was shouting out and praying, like, show me joy, show me this depth of life that you have for me. And I think he just kept literally putting those moments back into my head of like, well, where are you in this? Like, you're not in it, and you're not in this life that I've given you, because you were sitting on the sidelines performing for this invisible audience type thing.
So good.
Yeah. And so I think, and again, I began to realize, turning that a little bit, like how selfish that was. Like, my kids didn't see me eating their birthday cake, or like didn't get to experience their mom doing XYZ. Like, I'm taking that away from them. Like, they will only get me this one time. Lord willing, it's a long life, but like, they will only get their mother in that moment, that one time. So not only did I rob myself of that moment and that joy, like, I robbed them and my husband and like the actual people in my life that matter of that moment with me.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because a path away from God, sin, I mean, in general, it always has a funny way of convincing us that like this impacts nobody but us. Really, so like all of us start in this disordered eating habits, meaning like this doesn't bother nobody but me. I don't owe nobody anything. Like you know, like me choosing not to eat cake does not, like, I didn't tell anybody else not to eat cake. And it's all these different things that we like start to justify, right? Every single time we start to justify something, it's because like we're trying to protect a habit or something that we don't want to give up. You said something so important, and the Lord's just connecting so many dots for me right now. I'm reading through Hebrews 11 for like our Bible study, and I'm actually going through, so it's 11, and obviously that's the faith chapter, right? And I was like, I've read this, but I'm reading it through the Amplified Bible, and it is just ministering to me over and over and over, because yes, it says faith, but each time it says faith, there's almost this additional action word of trusting, to where there's never faith without trusting, right? And so think about, we don't ever let go of idols. We don't ever let go of serving the invisible audience or caring what the world thinks until we actually turn the corner and start trusting that he really is good, and that he really is faithful, and that he really is holy, and that he can't sin against us, which makes him the most trustworthy person. Jackie Hill Perry all day, you know what I mean? You know, but it's like one of those things that really, I really think that sometimes, because faith seems so undefined, and so for me going through the study with the Amplified Bible, I was like, it really just started defining faith, but it was always different, and a different action word, and a different intensity, and a different, I was just like, oh my gosh. But it was like, no, we really can't have faith unless you trust God. And I really feel like that is where we know that God is our savior. We know that he's powerful, but we don't see the power being used through us to free us of certain things because we won't trust God with those things. And so we live a saved life, but a powerless life against the things that he's called us to lay down, right?
Mhm.
It's just kind of one of these things that until you trust that God is better than your idol, you're never going to let go of it. And so I love what you said, where he was like, he's been so faithful, he's been so patient to prove himself when he didn't need to, that he is trustworthy, and that he is loving, and that he is good, and like the life that he's calling you to is good, which is even more interesting, that like you have that God-given desire, like you're like, there's something like this can't be it, like this cannot just be all that God has for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was like an itch, you know, it's like one of those things where I'm like, this is just, yeah. And it wasn't, I mean, yeah, I've suffered with anxiety and depression, and that is a real thing, but it wasn't that. It was just like floating throughout life. And I was like, well, this is good and all, but like, I just knew there's more, there was more.
And you're like, I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I haven't really thought through this, so this is not a full statement, but I wonder how much of anxiety and depression then goes back to not trusting God, right? Like, how much is that actually linked? Meaning that I wonder that as our trust increase in God, not because his ability to be trusted increases, but it's really our ability to continue to trust him and grow that, reduces the anxiety and depression that like we experience. Because it is real. It is real. And we know it didn't exist in the garden. So therefore we know that has to be a result of our sinful nature. You know what I mean? And so while I do believe that there are some chemical imbalances as well, I also believe, I just naturally wonder, is there a spiritual root to that as well? You know what I mean? Oh, so good. Okay. So I know that we went down so many rabbit holes. What do you feel that God has? I mean, obviously, like you shared how much he's like been like guiding you, but what are some of the unexpected things that the Lord like bubbled up that he was like, hey, Sarah, so like, we're going to talk about this, you know, and it may have seemed random. You're like, really, right now, you want to deal with this? Like in the middle of all this, like you want to talk about this? Like, do you have a certain something that you feel like the Lord was like, hey, let's address?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. Like, I think for me, like we've already talked about, so I won't spend time on it, but like who am I living for? And who does he call me? Like, who does he want me to serve while I'm here on this earthly planet? And what does serving him look like? Right? Like, that doesn't look like a certain appearance or a certain body. And so thinking about that, and living selflessly. So what does that look like as a mom? And that's been something I think over the past like 10 days, it's really been like digging at me, is like the self, then that's why I was probably one of the things I brought up is the selfish thing. And versus selfless living. And I think the past month, which you and I have talked about, is just like, what does rest look like?
Yes.
And why that's where like trusting him has gone for me, which I think is a societal issue. Like, why don't we like to sit? Why don't we like to rest? Why don't we like quiet? Like, I just kind of came up with not a challenge for myself, but like something I think is like, I mean, we all do, like, I don't do social media, but I'll listen to podcasts or I'll listen to an audiobook and all day while my kids are at school. And so like, why are we afraid of rest? Why are we afraid of silence? So that's been something that I've been like exploring, is because for me, and my personality and inclinations, like resting and sitting and being quiet bring up a lot of uncomfortable feelings, emotions, thoughts. And that's where the trust in him has to kick up to like a whole new level. And I honestly think that HA, tying that into, has a lot to do with resting. Like recovery is literally mostly resting. And that is the farthest thing from what most folks that land in this situation want to do or know how to do. And so, yeah, resting has been, I would say, the topic of trust, and where he's been leading me the past little bit.
Yes, I think rest is a huge one. Like as you were thinking, speaking, I was like, yeah, you know what? I want Nuggie to catch me resting. I want her
Yeah.
to see me rest. Like I want to actual rest. I want to model rest. I want to enter into his rest. You know what I mean? And no matter what that looks like, but also like, yeah, just the challenge of you don't have to be doing something all the time.
Yeah, because I think like I think most of us, or I was raised, were like, oh, I'm gonna be lazy today. I'm gonna take a nap. And I'm like, well, but you've worked hard 6 other days of the week and you're gonna take a 30-minute nap. Like, nope, that's actually so I've been trying to, like, if my kids just want to come home from school and just like lay and read a book, where normally I'd be like, okay, let's go do this. And I'm like, no, they need to rest. And that's what resting is like. And one thing, my kids went on a camping trip with my husband a couple weekends ago. And I found myself with like an afternoon. I was like, I'm kind of like caught up on what I want to do. And so I literally, this is going to sound so funny to some people, but like I set a timer and I was like, you're going to lay on the couch and you're not getting up for 45 minutes. Like you're just going to lay there. You can have a book, you can fall asleep, you can watch TV, but like you're just going to lay there. And at first it felt as if the world was like pulling me up, but I'm like, you are not getting up 45 minutes out of your week when you don't have children. This is what you should be doing. And I remember I told my husband and he just laughed because he's like, yeah, why wouldn't you just sit there? You could have watched football after, a man. He's like, I would have just sat there and watched football all day. I'm like, it's just so funny how, that gets wired in us. So yeah, resting is something that I want to model because again, like when you go back to the very beginning is I realize my kids pick up on more on what I do than what I say sometimes. And so like, and I'm still far from perfect at this, but I want them to hear me talking about resting in a good place and in a balanced place. And I want them to hear that resting is healthy as well.
Absolutely. And then just, yeah. And so okay, I mean, I guess we didn't even get to it, but we will get to your actual recovery because she did recover. But like you and I have talked about this as well, is like, man, if I don't address this, then like by like a natural coincidence, my kids will grow up thinking that what like a woman should look like or what was modeled because mom did it is someone who never sits down, never spends time, doesn't eat cake, doesn't, you know what I mean, do this. And so it's like this, it's almost like, and now some people go the complete opposite direction, but it's like we're almost like pre-setting their filters for potentially marrying someone who exhibits the habits that we're like, that's what you got out of the, you know what I mean? That just exhibits those habits just from seeing it modeled. And so I know I totally resonate with that of like, I really do feel really compelled not to be perfect, but to be like, not to normalize the places that the Lord is calling me to address, because if not, then it just gets passed on as normal to the next generation, to my next generation.
Yeah.
And so it's really,
yeah. And I think for me, my kids are a little bit older. And so I even sometimes vocalize it out loud, or like, as we transition to talk about my recovery, like I would talk to them about like why I'm making these changes or why I'm doing, and like saying it out loud. Then, I mean, yes, they do pick up on the modeling, but when you're making changes, I think that part of being a parent is showing that like you aren't perfect, and that when they were 3, 4, 5, like I wish I would have done things differently. And so now I'm going to do these things, and I want you to see the Lord working in me, because that's the goal, right? At the end of the day, I want my children to see that like I wasn't perfect, but with the faith of the Lord and like working with him throughout their lives and mine, like I'm becoming more Christ-like.
Yeah. You want to see that change is possible, you know?
Right. Because I don't want them to think they have to be perfect. Yeah.
Right. Oh, so good. Okay. So everybody who is tuning in, be like, but did she recover? Okay. So
I
how
did.
fast did you recover? Like how fast from when we kind of started to work together till when did you recover?
Okay, so well, I'll answer in two parts. So when we started working together, it was like 5 weeks from when I like said, "Hey Ash, let's work together," until ding ding ding, like recovery. With a little caveat, like I don't know exactly how long I ever had HA, because when I was in the depths of my disordered eating, so 20 years ago, I was also on birth control, which probably masked the symptoms because I was at a very, very low weight and exercising intensely. And then I continued on that birth control. So like, and then I got pregnant through fertility treatments. So like, I don't really know how long I'd had HA. It was definitely, I can say definitely on and off for the last 10 to 20 years, whether that was, getting the monthly bleed through a pill, which isn't ideal. And then afterwards, after having my children, I have twins. So after I had the twins, I did resume a normal cycle, and then it would like disappear for 4 or 5 months, and then it would come back, and then it would disappear. And then COVID hit, and we were like, okay, now everything in the world is like going nuts. So we're just going to shut down. So before working with you, it was probably a good like 2 years without a cycle, but I would definitely say off and on for the last 10, 15 years.
I love that you share that, because HA just isn't that it's gone. It's that like, it's touch and go. And I think kind of like what you were talking about is like, we don't even know for sure if it was ovulatory. You know what I mean? Like there's just so many.
Oh yeah.
And so what was
and I can now, and this is so interesting, like now that working with you and learning more through like tracking and what ideal cycles, and not even perfect, but like healthier cycles look like, I know for a fact I was not having ovulatory or anywhere near nice cycles.
Yeah. Because like once like you track using basal body temperature, just for anybody that was like tracking, not calories, basal body temperature, completely different vibe. You learn so much. You're like, yeah, that probably wasn't ideal before. So what specific changes made the biggest difference for you? And not that there's a magical food, or you know what I mean, or like a magical amount, but what were the changes that like you're like, yeah, that probably played a really big role, and I probably wouldn't have just stumbled upon it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think most people that end up in HA probably know what they need to do, right? I think they know if they've done any Google research at all, like, oh, I need to eat more and I need to exercise less. For me, I needed like, and I had tried that. And I quote unquote thought I was doing that. I just needed someone to be like, you need to eat more. Like, you need to eat more. You need to eat this. You need, not like you need to eat specific food. Like that is not enough. I needed someone to tell me it was okay. And I know that sounds so silly,
but
like I just needed someone verbally telling me and giving me permission and being like, yo. And it was almost like I needed someone to be like, look at what you're eating. You're not eating enough. Because when someone else says what you were eating during the day, and you hear it, you're like, oh, actually it wasn't that much. But when you're eating it, it feels like so much, especially if you've struggled with disordered eating. And so for me, I just needed that accountability through you to be like, no. Like I remember the first week you were like, did you seriously just eat 2 nuts, Sarah? Like you ate 2 Brazil nuts. And I remember you were like, you've got to give me something. Like, I can't even do this. Like, you ate half a banana. And, but at that time, like, even half of banana felt like hard to me. And now I'm not even kidding you. Like, I could eat probably 3 bananas in a day. But anyway, so I think what I needed was just that verbal, external, like independent third party, like not my husband, not anybody else. I need someone that I don't really know telling me like, girl, you need to eat more. Like, are you kidding me? You need to eat more.
Yeah, you're like, but you know, like I love that. Just what I also love is that we had your chart to confirm that it wasn't like just my
Yes.
opinion. It was your chart
Yeah.
seeing you're eating 2 Brazil nuts and your temperature is all the way down here. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
I think for me, thankfully, like I think the Lord knew that I honestly think he knew like it's been long enough and she needs to know pretty quickly, because once we like you helped me make some changes, gently helped me make some changes, and then you were like, okay, let's push it a little bit more. Like my chart pretty much reflected the changes I was making pretty immediately, which I am so thankful for, because it was just validation. And I honestly feel like even if I wouldn't have recovered my cycle, I saw it. So I'm very visual, black and white. I want to know this is working. And I saw it. So I knew things were happening, because it wasn't just like a little change. It was like a up to here.
yeah, it was like, oh, this chick's firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
Yes. And so did you?
And because once I started eating, which is crazy, and I think people in early stages don't believe this, and I didn't, because I was like, I'm so full, I'm not hungry. And then when you were like, give it a few days, and then when I did that, I was hungrier, not in a like gluttonous, savage way, but I was like, oh, I actually do think I needed that extra snack. I am hungry, but my hunger cues were so suppressed that I didn't think I was actually hungry.
So much, yes, 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 and yes. And I think even for you, didn't you make a small tweak in your exercise that again, you had already adjusted? And so for you, you're like, yeah, I think I'm good. And then for you, like it was just small tweaks.
Yeah, so that was kind of like the biggest thing I did on my own, I would say, is I used to be a very intense, like CrossFit in my gym, in my garage gym type gal. And I just stopped doing that for a while. So I would say it was probably a year and a half ago or so. For Lent, I just said, I'm just going to walk. Like I just felt the Lord being like, you just need to rest and you just need to walk. And so like I literally would only walk outside, like slowly. And then that changed into like doing Pilates and bar, which I can still see like a tendencies to get, because I really do enjoy exercise. So I see tendencies where that's still something I have to keep a check on. But yeah, so I've definitely cut back on the exercise, like high intense. And for me, that was a big trusting piece for me, and trusting that like health actually was not like doing CrossFit in my garage. Like that was the opposite of health. Now I might do that in a couple of years, but I'm still not like, I don't, even though I've had 3 recovery cycles, like I still don't think that's what health is for me right now. And I think that, making the changes, and that was something where I think I've had to lean into trust, is like, trust me with your health. Like, trust me that the people on YouTube or wherever, and again, I'm off of social media now, but like for years, I would like take advice from these people and I'm like, they know what's healthy for me. That's strange. Like they don't even know me. So I think doing some internal work of like, what is health and what is health for me right now?
I love it. Yes, seriously, so much progress. And honestly, like I know like it's easy for us to say this now, but it really did take so much of that process of trusting God, right? In order to get to this place to say, I'm here to figure out what health is for me and not what it is for everybody else or what everyone else says it is, right? You know what I mean? And I think that's just so huge. Well, I just want to thank you for jumping on here and sharing both the practical and the spiritual side of healing. I'm a firm believer that it's never just one. And so it's just beautiful to see it woven in, and just how, like, to make those changes, it does require trust. And the Lord was already working on that, you know? So, so beautiful. So I don't know if there's anything else that you just want to close it out with, anything. You're not on social media, so we won't be giving out any Instagram. She has officially chosen to not be on it, which is beautiful.
Thank you. No, I think I would just encourage people, no matter your age. Like, I think for me too, one thing that some days I'd be like, oh, you're 37, like you're like in 10 years you'll be in menopause, like it doesn't matter, you're fine, whatever, like you've gotten away with it so far. And then in other ways, and I think I told you the first time we ever talked, it was like I realized I was at this point where like I still have half my life to live. And so it's never too late. The Lord is never done. And I would just encourage you, no matter what age you are, the younger you are, the faster you should start to live out so you can live out that life that the Lord has for you. But there's always a reason to recover for mental and spiritual.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love, love, love it. Well, thank you. Thank you for doing this, and we'll be in touch. I'll email you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.